Okay, we'll call to order the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting of Tuesday, May 16th, 2017. Lisa, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Jessic? Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. LaSalle?
Here.
Mr. McEnroe?
Here.
Mr. Lyman?
Here.
Mr. Mahoney?
Here.
Item 2, approval of the minutes of April 18th, 2017. Does anybody have any changes or additions to those minutes? Seeing none, we'll call for approval.
I move the D be approved as written. Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Item 3, agenda analysis. Does anybody have anything they want to add to or change on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to citizens' comments. Item 4. I see no citizens in attendance this evening. So item 5, new business discussion items, 2017 TAC goals follow-up. John.
Okay, Lisa's going to hand out some information. Make sure I get a copy.
So that is the tax goals we went over with
Yeah.
Chair and Vice Chair, and that's from Aaron.
So, Lisa's handing out some things that we talked about. We met, everything's in relationship to my vacation. We met before I went on vacation, a couple days before I went on vacation.
So you've just forgotten everything.
I kind of have, and I didn't.
How many pages is this?
There's 2.
Just 2, one of each.
Yeah.
Did I get on this one?
So, given that, Bob, you want to lead the conversation? We met with Henry and Lisa and I, and we talked about goals, and that's what we've got in front of us. And we also asked that they kind of, to the degree they align with the city commission goals, that we kind of include that in the information. And so Lisa's provided that. So everybody have a copy of that in front of them?
We'll wait till it gets down the line here.
So you want to go through it, Bob, or you want me to go through it?
Oh, go ahead.
So we met for a little over an hour, and we talked about some things. We brought back the goals from prior year and some of the things that were mentioned in this meeting. The biggie was trying to figure out funding, right? That was probably the biggest initiative. It's good to have a group like this that's concerned about that for sure. So the bigger concern I had was just us taking too big a bite at the apple and over asking, right? So we talked a little bit about that and tried to set goals that were a little more what we call SMART goals, measurable. What's SMART stands? Specific, measurable,
attainable, realistic, and timely.
Yeah, there we go. So, so anyway, we talked a little bit about that, and with regard to this TAC goal, we decided that rather than try to settle on establishing a tax, that we should kind of focus a little bit more on finding out about the various funding options and how those have played out, at least for the city and maybe the county, because there were some questions about the county's recent gas tax information. And then, which reminds me, I did get information on that. And then maybe even the state. So, the first goal is gain qualified information on alternative funding sources for non-growth related transportation projects in the city of Oregon City by November 2017. So that met that SMART kind of goal criteria, and it also aligned with the with goal 5 of the city commission was to maintain the fiscal health and long-term stability of the city. So, was there anything else you guys want to talk about on that one?
Well, the only thing that comes to mind is that the legislature, ODOT has submitted to the legislature a rather omnibus funding package for transportation projects that involve lots of different things that we probably need to keep track of.
Is it $10 billion?
Yeah, but it also involves upping the registrations and upping the fuel tax and a mileage component.
And bicycle license.
And bicycle fees.
So
I think
what-
under that subject, we also touched on the possibility of a small gas tax. But we were first going to research maybe what the county has planned in the near future in regard to either gas taxes or vehicle registration fees, and what possibly the city could share of that would be to help with alternative funding before we really get into a lot of research about a gas tax. Isn't that pretty much what we had talked about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there was, again, looking at what others have done, looking at some history of gas tax and support in Oregon City. And I didn't bring it or include it or forward it to Lisa, but I did get a response from the county on the results of the gas tax vote on the last go-around. So we'll have that. We also did, when we, the other thing that I committed to bringing as we kind of talked through this was the city, when we move forward with the paper maintenance utility fee, we had the FCS group where John Ghilarducci do a white paper on different funding options. So we were going to, even though it's dated, those same options are still kind of out there and talked about. It's just really the amount of each of them, right? So we would bring that to this group as well. And one of the reasons why we passed along, so I'm not necessarily wanting to jump to the last agenda item, but those resources there that were included in your agenda packet for file number 17-310, there's a boatload of information in there, most of which I haven't reviewed yet, but the idea would be some of that might help inform some of our local conversations as well. So
I think we also were interested in determining what we would use alternative funding for, such as I brought up the idea of maybe helping to fund lapses in sidewalks.
gaps.
Gaps, yeah. Which would be, you hear a lot of people talking about lack of sidewalks, but they don't realize how expensive it is to fill in those gaps too.
And that was sort of addressed in the goals as stated when it said non-growth related, because we had lots of areas where we could make improvements, but we can't find the appropriate funding.
Right.
The next one was something that we've talked about a little bit before, and I'm just trying to remember, Lisa. The second page is outline for a traffic management plan, and had we produced that before, or is that something you put together?
No, that's actually something Henry had offered to do that we discussed in our meeting
okay.
about goals.
Okay.
He said he would bring an outline to the TAC outlining that neighborhood traffic management plan.
So the goal was outline a new Oregon City neighborhood traffic management plan, informing the outline with existing Oregon City Public Works and PD programs such as Drive Safe Oregon City. So that's a good start, it looks like.
This is what I'm envisioning here, is that we could discuss this and see if there's anything that needs to be taken out, or additional things put in, or things in the right places. Is this appropriate? And eventually end up with a written document that answers most of the questions that we keep hearing here all the time. Like, what is a warrant and why is it appropriate and that sort of thing.
Well, I appreciate you putting this together. This is quite a lot of information. I think that my own personal opinion is we should be given some time to really go over this outside of this meeting and then bring it up as an agenda item if there's room in the next meeting, so that we could all have an opportunity to really go through this in detail and form our ideas.
I think that's an excellent idea.
The draft goal is, or the proposed goal is outline a new traffic management plan. Do we have an outline? Maybe the goal should be to actually start the drafting as well of a new traffic management plan.
I believe that was when we had the discussion, that was the way we were working toward, was taking a long period of time and making sure we had things written in a way that was appropriate.
Yeah, we have to start from something though.
Yep.
So if we had some draft topics for the traffic management plan, that would help. Realizing it might take time, but we have to start someplace, and this is a good start. And it seems like it's time to move on to the next step then too. Like, for example, the city already has some policies regarding traffic management. That could be brought forward and let the committee know what those policies are. See how they fit in with this outline. Otherwise, if we just look at it, say it's a long-term project, it could take years and never get done.
The good thing about this is almost everything that's on this list is actually exists somewhere and just needs to be brought into one place.
Well, I think also you'll be interested in trying to make it neighborhood user friendly. So, I mean, you might be able to, behind each one of these items, cite existing code or state statute, but it would be kind of a legalistic language. So we want something that, as I'm listening to the conversation anyway, it sounds like we want something to hand to neighborhood lay people so they can read it and get a good understanding and head off a lot of questions.
Yeah, reader and user friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we truly are starting out from scratch, because in previous conversations, we noted that the neighborhood traffic management plan was on one of our objectives, but nobody could find even a sample.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lisa and I were just talking about that. My recollect was we found 2 samples. Can't remember which agencies they came from. I don't know if that's. I'm thinking in 2016 we brought them. I don't know if they're in the. I don't have my 2016 binder, but I'm wondering if we.
You did. They were handed out, and they were one-pagers. Pretty much said things like, you shouldn't speed in the neighborhood and that sort of thing.
Yeah, not many agencies have a fully functional neighborhood traffic management plan. So,
Well, it seems that you had a brief subcommittee here with 4 of you, 2 staffers and 2 members. So maybe we should have a subcommittee take a crack at, I don't know, item number 1, 2, or whatever they would be, and have a staff person with that subcommittee and see if you can come up with a written script language that would work, that would be easy to understand and not very long. And just try a couple of them and see how it works.
yeah, but I'd agree. I think we talked about doing an outline, and other than we haven't really looked at the outline, but we've got at least a draft. So that's a starting place, and it sounds like what we need to do is bring back some suggestions for either subcommittee or confirmation that we think that the outline works, and then figure out which sections we want to focus on. I mean, the traffic calming section, I think, is one that we can actually
Yeah.
inform with existing information.
Mhm.
Well, like, for example, item 3, street classifications. Each individual neighborhood would have a variety of those. I think it would be helpful for them to know which are major and which are minor arterials within their neighborhoods.
And we have those mapped. That would be either a list or a map that could be
Yeah.
inserted in that. So
Yeah,
So the intent is for this neighborhood traffic management plan to be specific to some of the features in some of the neighborhoods, not just an overarching for the whole city, like, for one neighborhood.
my understanding is a neighborhood traffic management plan is really a tool that helps smaller groups, less technical groups that aren't necessarily interested in knowing all the intricate details of our standard specifications, our code. It's more of a manual that makes that a little bit more easy for folks to understand. And so things like we have a stop sign brochure, talks about where we justify stop signs. That could be an element of the neighborhood traffic management plan. And once it's fully formed, it could be, posted to the website and be just a resource for JQ citizen who doesn't necessarily want to figure out what the MUTCD says or what our transportation system plan says.
speed humps would be another.
Traffic control issue.
Not to rename this, but just for my clarification, you call it a
So,
citizen-friendly traffic management plan?
Showed up to talk.
So that it's, like you said, easy read, easy understand. That helps me understand better, but not to change the name. I just wanted to make sure I'm clear as to
I think that's a good
who
suggestion.
the audience is.
Well, as chair of a neighborhood association too, it would be a big help to the chairs to be able to answer questions during their meetings that come forward from the community. I don't know. I fielded a lot of questions over the years, many of which I didn't know the answers to, and had to
just
follow
answered
up. See, so.
My thought on this too is that it shouldn't be the topic should be able to be explained in 1 or 2 paragraphs.
Yes.
So it's, not terribly in depth, but has the information necessary to be able to get the idea across as to what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That raises the subject is, are we talking about an action plan here or a dictionary?
More of an explanation of city policy and how to go about making changes if you want to make one.
Procedure
Yeah.
about making changes?
But that's a little bit confusing when you say neighborhood traffic management plan. When it says management plan, it's like how you're managing or planning something, versus like something that's more informative. Like this is
A
this
resource
is
rather
a
than a
resource.
plan.
Yeah.
So I think, neighborhoods don't really have much they can do in terms of the how the traffic is managed, but they will be able to understand and then take that action to the city and say, okay, we understand that.
Well, I think the outline that they've prepared here kind of builds the background. And I agree with your comment on kind of keep it to a layman's level. Maybe not a paragraph for each one of these, but
Yeah.
not overly verbose.
Exactly.
Just kind of build that background, build up a little bit more information, and then the last chapter is essentially what are efforts that your neighborhood could possibly do to help manage traffic within your smaller portion of this larger community. And that's when you start getting into the traffic calming measures that some of them are viable options that a neighborhood could do. Traffic circle? Probably not. but sidewalk bump outs, speed humps, stop sign reconfigurations, if you can go into the complexity of trying to meet the requirements for that, but at least you spell it out saying it's not, it's not off the table, but just realize it's a lot more technical than just saying we're going to change this into a four-way stop.
But who would do the actual work? Like, let's say neighborhood wanted to do sidewalk bump outs. How would they go about doing that?
So that's already explained in the brochure that we have for, well, not bump outs. I'm sorry, I thought speed humps is where you were going.
No, the sidewalk bump outs. I just picked it up. Like, do they come up with the funds, pay the city do it? If they feel like that's something they want in their neighborhood, particular street.
Yeah, no.
How does that work?
Well, I mean, for me, those are more complicated, right? Than that, we would have to, there's obviously drainage and signage and all the pieces that go. You can't just do one corner. You got to do all four. There's a significant project there. But I mean, acknowledging that we utilize curb extensions or bump outs, whatever you want to call them, in some of our design standards, and maybe where we use them versus where we don't, where we wouldn't approve them. That kind of information could be in this, so that the community would know, well, I live on a street that I really want slower traffic. I've heard of these curb extensions. What do they look like? What's the science behind them? And are they something that, my street would accommodate?
I wouldn't call this neighborhood traffic management plan.
So
But that's why I think when you get back to it's a resource. It's not necessarily a plan. It's an educational tool.
Yeah, I think.
And one of the things we should be educating them is on bump outs, traffic circles. Those are things that require capital investment dollars and technical expertise. I don't expect a neighborhood to be able to do those.
Well, that's
but
what
at
I'm
least
saying.
you can spell that out in the document, so they're not wasting their time with, let's do bump outs, and not contemplating all the complexity of that.
It would be good to have like actions that they can take
Yep.
as individuals or neighborhood versus what actions would require.
Well, I think the
City
Drive
action.
Safe Oregon City campaign is one of them that needs to be listed here. Speed humps. We've got a policy for neighbors that want to implement speed humps. There's some legwork that's associated with that, and it's a financial burden which they have to bear.
Well, so maybe we could call this like neighborhood traffic.
Well, one of the things I was
resource plan. Or
but I was looking at taking the word plan and just calling it policies, because it is our practices, some word like that. So neighborhood traffic management practices or policies, and then one policy is the speed bump policy. And maybe that way, you can have one subsection that deals with individual neighborhood things that the neighborhoods could do as a lay group primarily.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, you could put down, say, how do you get a speed bump built or something like that, and then not explain it all in this plan,
Right.
but refer it to where they can find out detailed information about speed humps or about bump outs or stop signs. Give them a source to go to get more detailed information.
So it seems like, we're all pretty close to being on the same page, but everybody has a little different look at what this might end up being. So I think having a subcommittee meet again and maybe get someplace where we can have some consensus on something at the next meeting, then we can jump off and start working on elements of it.
So this item came up last year, and it came up when we were reviewing the bylaws. So in the bylaws, the first purpose statement is where we hear the term neighborhood traffic management plan. And that question came up because it was in our bylaws and it was our first kind of purpose, if you will. We don't have a neighborhood traffic management plan. And at the time, I wasn't really familiar with what that is. And I think every city that has one, it's not exactly the same thing. It's a document that from what I've seen, and which hasn't been a lot, my recollect is 2, that they were more kind of taking that universe of all the traffic kind of things that the agency folks have to deal with, whether it be code or TSP or MUTCD, and kind of put it into something that's more specific for what that agency and the neighborhood folks might be most interested in, right? And in kind of a usable form. That was my impression of what that is. What we title it, other than the fact that it's listed in our bylaws, we probably ought to have, if we're going to call it a citizen-friendly neighborhood traffic management practices manual, we probably ought to say AKA neighborhood traffic management plan, because it's in our bylaws, and that's really what started this.
Well, how difficult is to change the bylaws to whatever?
We could change the bylaws. That's a vicious circle. We get into changing bylaws, but that's kind of my recollect, and I think when we talked about these goals, you remembered that, right? That was something you guys kind of were advocating for. These are really the only 2 goals that I see of as kind of having an outcome at the end of 2017. Hopefully we have something. And we set the bar maybe a little too low, given that given that Henry's already created our draft, but it is draft, right? The first time we've seen it, first time I've seen it, first time you've seen it. So I guess it would say I don't necessarily know that we have outlined a new Oregon City traffic management plan. I think we have a start, right?
We only have a start.
That maybe needs to be talked about in either time dedicated in this, or maybe a subcommittee that kind of brings that.
One thing I would point out is that we have a June meeting, and then we're off for 2 months. And so
that's typically what we've done.
Yeah, and so if we want to get this done by November, I could bring back some pieces of this to kind of better illustrate where I think it would go.
This one, we didn't put a November date on it.
Okay.
The other one we did, but they are 2017 goals. So if we're not, do we meet in December? You guys remember?
No, we skipped December.
So maybe it is in November.
Well, if we can get reasonable consensus in the June meeting after we get a little more feedback from Henry, then we could have a subcommittee working on it over the summer, and then in the fall we'd have a draft to work from.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You got all that?
Well, it's still not clear in my mind as what we're trying to achieve.
Well, part of what we're trying to achieve is to figure out what it is we're trying to achieve.
So I just looked up Lake Oswego, and they have a neighborhood traffic management program. I'll just read what it is. It was established in 1993 to give citizens in neighborhoods greater participation in decisions regarding traffic management on neighborhood collectors and local residential streets in order to promote the safety and livability of residential neighborhoods. So I read that as this is an informative information packet, a resource for people in the neighborhood.
And I could be wrong, but I think Lake Oswego was one of those agencies that we were able to find we had their example.
I think Sandy rings a bell
City of
too.
Sandy has one too. I didn't go to that one. I just went to Lake Oswego.
Those can be attached to the agenda next time, so the rest of us don't have to try to go find those. But if you attach those two, and this is a specific agenda item next time, with some additional fine-tuning by Henry here, then maybe we'll be close enough to have some specific directives for a subcommittee to work on something this summer.
Okay. Is the goal as written? Do you feel not get us there? Do we want more to it than that?
I would suggest that instead of just stopping at the outline, it actually say produce.
Yeah, I think so.
Produce an outline.
No, produce a whatever.
Resource,
Yeah.
the
By
product.
by the end of 2017. That's what I'm a little bit worried about.
Well, by the end of 2017 or by the middle of 2018, you know,
Would this be something that would have to go before the city commission?
Well, it would add more validity to it if it did.
they would certainly be interested in seeing it as an information item.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could put produce in there, and it's a measurable goal, and if at the end of December we're not done, then you could say, well, we accomplished, we're 50% done or something.
How about this outline and draft?
Works for me.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay. The other two or other three goals are more like ongoing participation and so participation in community advisory committees, whether it be the one that is most active right now, which has been the alternate mobility study. Some of you were sat in on the SDC forum, those kinds of or not, we called it SDC roundtable. But those are going to come up from time to time, and we didn't get specific about which ones. And then development, there's been a lot of discussion about how do we get this group in front of development at the right time. And some of the, like Willamette Falls Legacy Project, that's on the agenda for tonight to talk a little bit about that. A lot of these are in the land use process now. So we don't necessarily fit very well in there because of the times we meet, but you've gotten information about how to stay involved in those projects. So some of you may be really interested in the Legacy Project, and others may be more interested in the most interesting project, which is the Public Works Operations Center. Or whatever.
What'd you say?
Huh?
Is there something going on with Public Works that we don't know about?
You know,
No, you know about it.
whether you're interested or not. Is the question.
Oh, okay.
What about the Myers Road? Are there any other major projects that aren't bulleted there?
Oh yeah, that's not an exhaustive list. I
No.
mean, we've got lots of
Yeah, those are
projects.
just
Those are just examples.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, just like tonight, we're going to go through a variety of those projects and give you some form of updates. So that's kind of if you come to the meetings, if you come to the meetings, you're going to get this one here for sure, and the last one, which is listen to the community or citizens about complaints. So really, those are pretty easily achieved as long as you make it to the meetings. But they don't have necessarily a deliverable, other than the development. Maybe some conversation comes out of here that influences some public testimony at a public hearing or something.
I like the way you formatted and correlated each one with the city commission goals. That's helpful.
I think you asked for that, John.
Yeah, we did.
So I think it looks good too.
So it's a good thing you like it.
Well, I particularly like the light green there. I'm ready to move that we approve this with the amendment to the second item that we just discussed.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve these 2017 TAC goals. Any further discussion?
With the change in language.
added on.
Change in language in item 2 to outline and draft a new Oregon City blah blah blah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, approved. And thank you, Henry, for your hard work here. That's quite a document you provided us.
I've had many years to think about it.
Okay, item 5B, SDC project update.
So this could take more than one meeting time. So it's really just an update. Some of you attended. I'm trying to think. I know I saw John there. Henry, were you there?
No, I
wasn't at that one. To follow up with the SDC forum that we did back in actually 2000, I think it was 2015. We did an SDC roundtable, which is to kind of get back to the folks. Most of the people in the room were for the chamber. There was a lot of mostly business folks, business representation, and we had yet another update on kind of SDCs and some of the science behind SDCs specific to transportation. And really, I didn't want to go into a lot of detail other than to acknowledge that the meeting recording is now on our website, as well as some project lists and project maps are on the website. So I think the meeting was successful. There was really just looking for some feedback without any specific direction from that group in preparation to take, the next step would be to take to the City Commission in a work session some hard proposals about SDCs for transportation. So right now we had a pretty full work session agenda for July, and if you follow the City Commission, they typically do one work session a month, and so we're trying to figure out if we're going to do that, be ready for that in July, or if we're going to do that in August. So that's my report on that item.
Just out of curiosity, did you get through the whole agenda and the time available?
We did.
Mm-hmm.
We did. We had a pretty full. There was also PowerPoint, so that's also loaded on the website. So yeah, it was pretty full agenda, a lot of content, and I'm not going to try and go through it or repeat it tonight. But if you're interested in transportation SDCs, between the two meetings that we had, the forum and the roundtable, you'd get a pretty good education on SDCs. What did you think, John? Agreed, or?
Yeah, the professional who was under contract was sitting about where you were. He stood up, and I thought he covered a lot of ground that was relatively new to me. So I thought that was really
That was John
informational.
Ghilarducci, right?
Yeah, I think so.
With the FCS group.
Yeah, I felt the same way. They did a really good job of putting that together and presenting it. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on.
Did we record that meeting by any chance?
Yeah.
We did?
Yeah. There was microphones and
A lot of participation.
And in a nutshell, the fees are going to be increased, or what's the?
that remains to be seen. I mean, that's part of the work
Okay.
session discussion, but trying to figure out how to cover our project wants or our project list needs. In order to do that, we would probably see SDC increases.
There was some graphics comparing Oregon City's SDCs and in particular the traffic system development charges with a bunch of other agencies. Looked like maybe 8 to 10 other agencies, cities. And that was useful.
We weren't at the top of the list. We weren't at the bottom of the list.
And a couple of those that were behind us are in the process of increasing theirs.
Right.
So will we probably increase ours, but
Yeah, so SDCs across the region change based on who's doing transportation system plan updates or bike pedestrian plan updates, all those things that result in a project wish list. If they're at all related to new development or growth in the community, then there's usually an SDC element to them. And our TSP was done in 2012. So we haven't updated the SDC. We just kept it the same. So there is some work to be done there because we're still living off the 2009 update project list. And there are some definite differences between the two. So that's another thing that will come before the city commission.
I think that those other cities that are proposing to increase their SDCs, get them raised, there'll be some room for Oregon City then to maybe raise theirs and still remain toward the middle of the pack, the way I remember those graphs.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see. Item 5C, alternative mobility study update.
This is another meeting that's online and televised, and got a lot of details. Henry's been attending those meetings, and the last one was pretty interesting, I thought, in that we were really kind of able to draw some conclusions, but it was somewhat controversial in that, actually you're on that too, aren't you, Bob? Mm-hmm. In that, it's back to, how do we continue to get refined numbers with traffic counts, right? So there was some suggestions that maybe we redo some of the traffic counts because they were doing some extrapolation based on a February date. So right now the consultant is doing more traffic counts on that to help inform that. And we are also looking a lot harder at a public improvement at that intersection that would include, so if you're headed essentially westbound on Beaver Creek or coming from the high school and wanting to go to 205, so you're turning north on 213, having a free-flowing right there that would have a acceleration lane.
Boy, I think that is really good. You get a big bang out of your buck with that one there. You
Yeah.
really do.
So there was some difference of opinion from ODOT about how long that lane should be. So depending on the length of that, obviously the longer it is, the more expense there is to it. But
But also the more effective it is too, John.
maybe more effective, yeah. So Kittleson's expanded their scope a little bit. Kittleson and Associates is the consultant who's leading that effort, and we're also looking more at Redland and Highway 213, and that's becoming the more a full fix of Beaver Creek and 213 is a very expensive project, probably in that $50 to $75 million range. But Redland and 213 is a less expensive fix, but it's still a very expensive fix, probably more than we can afford to do. So trying to get the numbers to play out there, we're going to be pretty difficult. But again, I think the process is moving forward pretty well, and I think once we get more information, then we take that before the Planning Commission next. So
I think the technology's there. I just think it's a matter of funding. Really, just a matter of funding. Because I heard a lot of good ideas,
yeah.
and I think credit where credit is due. Damon Mabey was the one that made that northbound acceleration lane suggestion, and it really made a lot of sense to a lot of people.
Great. Anything else?
And Dan Fowler was agreeable to it,
Yeah,
and I think,
well,
and he's doing the development work
Yeah,
on the
he
backside, I
didn't object
think.
to it. I don't know how supportive he is, but.
Okay, item 5D, the Oregon Legislative Funding Package Proposal.
So that was an informational item. There's a lot of information there. Again, there's somewhere between $5 and $10 billion. The article that I sent out talked about an $8 billion fix for Oregon roads that would cover anything from bridges to multimodal to pavement maintenance. There was a pretty long wish list, and it seemed to touch just about every citizen in one way or another, whether you were a property owner or not, whether you were a car owner or not. They had registration fees for bicycle and that. They had an increase in registration fees for vehicles, gas tax, licensing fee increases,
Goals.
Tolls.
Tolls.
Yeah.
tolls was discussed. It's just too early to tell. I think it's just interesting information for us to track, but there's a lot of debate about how far that's going to go, and I'm sure it's going to morph into something quite different by the time the legislature acts on it. So I
I
wanted to make
noticed
sure you had
some
that.
people were looking for more information. Did I get this as an agenda attachment?
It was an attachment, but they were hyperlinks to both the articles.
Oh.
So you must have printed off the article from the
Oh.
hyperlink. But if you click directly on the PDF, it'll take you directly to your article.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Item 5E, Public Works Report.
Do you want to talk about the summer construction project?
Sure.
Here's the.
So the latest version of the Trail News came out last week. Each of you should have received one of these in your mailbox. This summer, in an effort to kind of, we had really good response last year from the mail out that we did, where we gave everybody a copy of the construction work that we were doing for the summer and kind of gave them timelines on what to anticipate in terms of impacts. But the cost of that was pretty extensive, doing unique mail outs with just a single flyer. So what we decided to do this year was incorporate it as part of the Trail News for the summer edition. Helps us defer the cost because this is already getting mailed out. We're basically just paying for the color insert. Most of the major construction and maintenance projects that we're proposing for the summer for all of the public works divisions are noted in here. So we ask you to take a look at it, kind of peruse it. It's all of the PMUF pavement maintenance work that you guys are aware of, all of the water main replacement projects that we're doing, and some of our sanitary sewer moratorium projects that we're keeping moving on. So I think it's a really good publication. I'm waiting to hear some good feedback from everybody. And there's a little description of all of the major projects, gives you a good outline of what your tax dollars are doing, and more importantly, what to try and avoid during the summer. Okay. Yeah.
We don't want to miss the back page of this either.
Well,
Draw
what's
their attention, not that back page. The back
Oh.
page of the.
There's a very nice write-up that some quasi-journalist put together on the Public Works Operations Center. So we're pushing forward with that project, just to give you an update. Next week, on the 23rd, we have the Historic Review Board presentation. We've already done one version of it. We're coming back again, doing the same presentation. Many of you that are supportive of the Public Works Operations Center project, I ask you to come and speak. There are plenty of those that will come and speak in the other direction, but anybody that's supportive of us providing good quality public works services for the entire city should be interested in how we move forward with that project.
What's the meeting date?
Yeah.
It is the 23rd. It's the HRB meeting. It's at 7 p.m.
Here.
here at this location. Yeah. And I'm just double checking. I got my. Yes, we're on the agenda. Okay. So that's summer construction update.
That's not in the agenda, but you should mention it once you're there.
Yeah. So the Teddy Bear Parade is also noted on here. We wrote a detour route for this year. Traditionally, the Teddy Bear Parade starts down on Main Street, right there at 10th, and then moves down Main Street on Main Street Extension and ends over at Clackamas Park where they have the carnival. Because of the construction going on with the code, we had to reroute the parade for this year. We didn't want to cancel the parade. So the parade route will continue down Main Street, make it to 14th Street, and then take a right, and then head up to Washington Street and continue to northeasterly up to the end of the Oregon Trail Center. So that will be the terminus for the parade. Kids, participants can all be picked up there. People are encouraged to visit the end of the Oregon Trail Center while you're there. The carnival is still going on, and it will still be at Clackamas Park, but it's just people are being asked to shuttle over there. The parade route won't end there. Okay. That starts with the closures at around 10, and then everything should be open back up around 11. Portions of the Main Street corridor will be closed for staging, primarily Railroad from 7th all the way back out until Main Street. And that starts at around 7:30 until 10 o'clock for just the staging area. All right. Anything else in here?
Avoid downtown unless you're planning to attend the Teddy Bear Parade.
Yeah. But the weather's going to be spectacular for Saturday. I've got reserve duty, so I won't be there, but our more than competent streets division will be taking care of all of the traffic control with the police department. So John and others in the department have been working with ODOT to try and get the railroad tracks replaced over there, either removed or replaced, right there at Main Street and 99. So 99 State Highway, everybody knows that. It's their right-of-way. They're very protective of their right-of-way. The rail line belongs to Union Pacific. Their responsibility, also very protective of their area responsibility. The city's kind of stuck in as the intermediary between all those guys and pushing them forward to do something about the failing crossing there. You might have noticed about 2 weeks ago they came in and they had a little hit squad that got in there, and in about 3 hours were able to mill out the 2 failing portions of the at-grade concrete crossing and then lay in some new asphalt and get those fixed. We're still working with them in terms of getting to a final solution, which means removing all of the sections of the track through 99 and hopefully through all of Main Street. We're hoping to try and come to an agreement on who does what. We've got an agreement in concept, but again, money always comes down to the final decision makers. Timing for that, we're still talking about that, but there's some pluses and minuses to try and coordinate it with the next project that you'll hear about, which is the 99E Bluff Replacement Project. This is going to be traffic-geddon, okay? It goes into effect June 16th, and it will be in effect until the end of June. We highly recommend avoiding 99E during that time period. We'll be restricting 99E to a single lane north and southbound. So one lane north, one lane south. ODOT's on board and working with us on this. We've got an approved traffic control plan and permit from them. The necessity requires us to replace the water main that comes along the bluffs and then goes down and feeds the Blue Heron project. The only way we can effectively do that is by closing off the 2 downhill lanes and essentially shifting everybody over into the 2 uphill lanes with one dedicated for each direction. That project, like I said, it's going to be the 16th through the end of the month, with a pretty time certain on the contract time for getting the work done. Most of it's going to be kind of fabricated off-site and then just kind of brought in here and assembled on scene.
Is it 24/7?
No, it's not. The safety issues associated with it won't allow us to work night work. We talked about that and actually were considering it at one point, but we felt it was safer to try and just keep it to daylight hours. But they will be doing extended working hours during that project.
And
But the traffic-
lane closures will
Yeah. Oh, the lane closures will remain in effect 24/7. Yeah,
Okay.
the diversions, because the Jersey curb protective barriers that they have to put in and the steel plating they have to put in to protect the road while they're doing any work, in case anything comes down, that all has to stay in place.
Is the pipe underneath the road getting replaced, or does it need to be replaced?
So one of the first tasks they're going to be doing is investigating the status of that pipe, but we don't know the answer to that question yet.
You do that with TV?
Yeah.
Video?
Little robot we run down there.
What were the time frames on that again, Martin?
June 16th through the end of the month.
2 weeks.
Yep.
Roughly.
It's a 10-day work cycle that's written into the contract.
Has ODOT given any indication to you that they were going to shut down the freight lines through there?
So we're working with ODOT's freight mobility group and doing an advisory through them that basically they've got representatives from all the major freight carriers. Dana, the project manager, is prepared, notification that's going out through them through ODOT, kind of telling them what's coming up to avoid this area. Conversely, you all know what's going on with South End. So we had a meeting today, and we're sending another notification through the freight mobility carrier saying, don't detour onto South End Road because of what's going on 99
I was watching
and Center Street.
I was watching a 10-yarder with a pup trailer this morning, and he takes up a lane and a half going south
On
99E to get through the tunnel without scraping the walls.
That's one of the reasons we have to throttle down to single lane in each direction, because we're basically going to let them straddle the center line when they get through the tunnel.
Well, that'll be fun when one's coming the other way.
You're giving
Not-
them a lane, you're giving
Not
them a
the
lane
double,
and a half for
the
each.
skipped center line, not the double solid yellow.
The traffic control goes all the way pretty much to
They'll be able to
Sixth
go into
Street,
the other
yeah.
lane, right?
I'm sorry?
You're moving it. You're giving them a little more width.
Yeah, so as they
You
come
don't-
near the work zone, they're going to shift out around the work zone, and then they'll come through, and then at the tunnel, they'll be able to kind of take
back.
both of the dedicated uphill and downhill lanes, and they'll be able to straddle that to go through the turn. It's the only safe way to kind of shift the traffic through there and allow for those longer trucks to safely make it through. It's complex.
Yes. A good reason not to be there.
I'm taking vacation during it. So it's all done.
He's smart.
Chain of command.
99 tunnel project illumination. John knows more about that than I do.
Right. So on the map here, Martin talked about kind of the two stars that are on Main Street, and then up near Third is where that waterline pipeline. The tunnel illumination project is a ODOT project, although we are contributing some money towards the illumination, not towards the illumination. So by illumination, I mean the lighting in the tunnel is going to all be replaced, and that's an ODOT project. That's a safety enhancement project, and they're, what I understand is they're going to, at a minimum, pressure wash inside there and kind of get all the grime and gum off the inside of that and put in new lighting.
I don't think there's a pressure washer powerful enough to do that.
Is it going to be more light in the
Sandblasting,
in the
maybe?
PED section too?
I believe so, yeah. And then the other piece with that is a project that we are participating with, which is advanced warning signage, which is that second star off to the left there on 99E. So if you drive down 99E now, you know there's a pedestrian, or there's a sign, not a pedestrian sign, there's a sign up there that says slow, I think. And I drive by that thing every day. I should remember.
It just
that.
says tunnel, but aluminum
Does
is
it
hanging
say
from
tunnel? Yeah,
Yeah.
tunnel. So the intent there is to put something that's more advanced warning that says curve ahead, congestion ahead. I don't know the messaging yet, but ODOT's going to do those two projects in coordination together, so that the idea is that was a condition of the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, and the recognition that congestion's going to get worse at that intersection as the Willamette Falls Legacy Project develops. So that was one of the conditions we had to contribute to a portion of that that advanced warning system, so that people, if traffic was backed up in and through the tunnel, people coming down the hill would have something that would kind of wake them up, essentially, to say.
And the sign is going to be up higher, or
It
or
will-
as you're driving down, you'll see it
right.
as you're getting down the
And
hill.
you'll drive right underneath it. So it's going to go pretty similar to whether they can use this existing arm or not, I don't know, but it's pretty close to where that sign is now that says tunnel.
Yeah, it's that pedestrian bridge over 99, and it hangs from that.
That's
No,
a different
There's
one.
another one down.
Yeah,
the
there's
hill
a
from
mast
there.
arm that's south, or not south, that's what, north
Okay.
of the...
They may add something at the pedestrian bridge too, John. We haven't seen the full extent of that. They
Yeah.
haven't really started the design, but really that's a 2018 project. So we're probably not a 2017 project. And then the last one the star that we included is at Railroad at 99E. And another condition of the Willamette Falls Legacy Project was that the city try to put somewhat of a deceleration lane that gets you off of 99 onto Railroad Avenue. So there's not a lot of.
Oh my God, how are you going to do that?
You're gonna widen the tunnel, huh?
We're not going to widen the tunnel. So there's that parking lot right there on the corner there, and we're taking a piece of that parking lot to essentially create a little turn pocket, if you will, and then broaden that radius. The thought is there'll be more pedestrian traffic that'll come out of that tunnel that you mentioned. And right now, if you're a pedestrian,
You're
be
right
careful.
there.
You're right there. So this would move people out, give both the pedestrian and the driver a little more opportunity to see one another and avoid one another. But it requires us to acquire some right-of-way there, and so we're just starting the right-of-way acquisition process. And I suspect we're going to be condemning some property there. And then once we have the property, move forward with construction of that down the road. Again, that's probably not even 2018. That's probably a few years out.
Is any of the parking that's against the railroad tracks affected?
A few of those parking stalls would be. But the idea would be to get back on the railroad
Right.
alignment once you made kind of a little bit wider loop around.
Any plans to clean up the pedestrian tunnel? And lights on that as well?
The lighting in there would be improved. It's always, I just think due to the nature of that, we're going to have trouble with tagging in that
Yeah,
tunnel.
yeah.
But hopefully the lighting will help. And hopefully they'll build it in such a way that the lights won't become the next new target.
Yeah.
Will people quit camping in there?
I haven't heard them camping in there. Are they camping in there?
Oh, they have from time to time.
Okay.
What is the timing of the tunnel lighting project? Because I know there will be traffic restrictions when they're doing that.
Yeah, that's further out. In fact, the state is looking at a rockfall project. I can't remember if they came to this group or they definitely came to the city commission to report and the CIC to talk about all that rockfall protection really from the tunnel on up. Most of that is areas of concern. They've got concern really all along 9090, and so they're trying to scope that out for they're pretty sure they don't have enough money for everything, but they want to do that rockfall project, and then the lighting project, and the rockfall project is supposed to happen in 2018, and then shortly thereafter in the same year as the lighting project.
One of the things ODOT mentioned to us when we were initially meeting with them regarding our project is they're very interested in our traffic control plans because it's the test case for their projects that are coming down the line.
Traffic control plan is the plan that you are proposing for the water pipe replacement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, we proposed it, sat down with ODOT, they approved it, so it's in our bid document for the so he doesn't really have much latitude.
No, I know. I was just saying they're going to see how that works
Yeah.
for their.
They're going to take
their
it. If it works good, adopt it. If it doesn't, tweak it. But pretty much along those lines.
Yep. All right. The other update was, again, Martin knows quite a bit about this too. Can we get that other slide up, Lisa? Just wanted to kind of share with you what are we up to? 7 slide areas. And just acknowledge that I would say one of those isn't really a slide area, it's just an area that we're keeping track of, which is Center Street. So from left to right, we'll go South End Road and the closure there, and the county's making progress on that. Sounds like they're talking about
Maybe
4 weeks out.
3 to 4 weeks out, doing doing an emergency repair, which will allow them to reopen the road. I recently went to some training that brought some other federal program dollars to everyone's attention, and we brought it to the county, and they're submitting an application for some federal highway dollars that may allow them to do the permanent fix. That will be somewhere 2 to 3 years down the line, and in the neighborhood of $1.5 to $2 million.
So the idea is to try and get just the pavement repaired so that people aren't wanting to swerve out into the oncoming traffic to avoid the ripped pavement that's there now. And I know they also need to do some geotechnical inclinometers, so they're planning to do some geotechnical work along there that may require some special access. The other project that's, again, not really a slide, but it's something that we're watching because we think, there's obviously deterioration, especially with all the traffic loads on Center Street Hill. So that's another one that we're kind of trying to see if we can't secure some. Martin's put the application together for that one. See if we can't secure some funding to help with the Center Street final solution. And then we've got a slide that doesn't really affect the street, but between 14th and 15th, just kind of down the hill from Jackson, that we're watching. That's mostly impacting residential properties and some buildings they have. There's another one at 12th and Taylor, or more, it's off of both of those roads, but it's there's 2 residences, maybe 3 residences that have some activity going on behind their houses that we're keeping an eye on. Again, not impacting traffic. The one near the top of the page is Holcomb Boulevard, which Bob, you're familiar with. You drive by that every day. We've completed the survey. We're working on the geotechnical scope. The intent is to work with the street department to build whatever the geotech recommends, whether it's sloping that back or putting in some kind of gabion wall or something like that to repair that area that's currently covered in plastic.
What is a gabion wall?
A gabion wall is more of a wire basket full of rock in it that you typically see. Yeah. I think the consultant thinks we can do that within the right-of-way that we have with more of a sloped solution, but sometimes they just, to make the slopes work, they still need kind of a row of gabions. So I haven't seen his recommendation yet, but we're working on that one. I suspect that one's going to be late summer before we get that one moving. We haven't talked about schedule, but we're hoping we can do that without spending a lot of resources on a contract and bid documents.
Well, we made it through a pretty darn wet winter without additional sliding there. That was kind of fortunate.
I really think that slide had more to do with some problems with the drainage on those 2 private properties that sit up there.
Yeah.
And just lack of maintenance there on their part that then saturated that slope. And I don't think we'd have had the problem if their on-site maintenance had been a little different. Trillium, Martin made the news today. I saw his interview there. Didn't you guys think he looks beautiful?
I got an appointment with HR, buddy.
You did a good job with that. And although I heard from Laura that that was about a half an hour's interview, and they used about, that's typical.
30 seconds.
Yeah. And what frustrates me about that is I felt like the article still left it questionable about the slide and whether the city reacted appropriately, when in fact we're quite confident that we did everything right there that we could do. We just have an area that's susceptible to sliding. We don't have any we have a water pipeline that pulled apart there.
Well, that's typical media, though.
Yeah.
They do pick and choose, and I know I've been involved with media over the years in the heating oil industry, and some of the interviews that I was subject to did not get my point across at all.
Yeah.
It's pretty disappointing.
Yeah, so anyway, they just leave the question out there for the community to chew on when in fact they could probably put a lot more closure to the issue.
Yeah.
And then Forest Edge and the landslide up there just below Berry Hill Apartments is continuing to deteriorate. The good news is the apartments on the top side, they've hired a contractor to build a retaining wall, and that's quite a retaining wall. soldier piles and tiebacks, and I think I've shared some of those slides with you in the past, but that project's moving forward, and so it's my understanding that all the soldier piles are in, and now they're just building the tiebacks. So I tried to get a better update from one of our inspectors today, but we never connected. So, but I hear that's going fine. So that's landslide activity in Oregon City, and
Can I make a comment on South End Road?
sure.
At the intersection of Second and South End, the southbound lane is barricaded entirely. But there's a sign on there that says road closed to through traffic, which implies that local access is allowed. The few times I've driven through there, I've seen two cars wanting to get across the intersection and drive south. One guy wanted to make a left turn into a driveway, which is just past the intersection. The other guy may have just wanted to park in front of that apartment building or whatever it is right on the corner on the right side of the road. And then other cars might want to go up to Kanema, and the road is not closed off there. But in order to get across, they have to drive into the lane of oncoming traffic. And I don't think that's a safe situation. When the barricade first went up, they did have a little space in there where a car could get through there. But it's barricaded completely now, so people have to drive into oncoming traffic.
There's also no indication as to where it's actually blocked. You know.
Well, they know for sure it's not blocked up to their driveway they have to turn into.
Well, yeah.
We can definitely share those comments. I think it's been a challenge because we leave a little gap and everybody tries to use it. And then then they're choosing to use Sunset in the Kanema neighborhood to get wherever, and once they find the hard closure. So after this many days of closure, it might be that if we eke that back a little bit to provide a little more gap, we might not have the problem. But so just so you know, the county is responsible for that segment of South End Road, and they have worked. I mean, there was a lot of collaboration that went into that, but they put together the road closure plan, and we put together the detour plan. So we did all the detour signage, which I'm sure all of you are following rather than going up Center Street. But we are directing folks to Fifth and Lynn Avenue and Warner Parrott. That's our preference. Obviously, those that know the neighborhood tend to use Center Street, but we'd really rather keep people off Center Street. But anyway, the roles and responsibilities were that section that you're talking about is the section that the county and the county engineer designed and put together. I think the intent and the communication, I don't know if there was face-to-face communication with those property owners, but was to come around and use either Kanema or Center Street and come down Sunset, or there is one other little connector street there, and then come down rather than go in and use the opposing traffic.
The gap that you talk about is probably wide enough for a bicycle if that wide. And it was only within the last couple of weeks that I've seen cars drive up in there.
So we've made adjustments with the positions of that road closure sign throughout the deployment. Initially, they were further back, and we got numerous complaints that people weren't seeing the sign in time. We got complaints about people queuing into that space, trying to claim local access. So it's been throttled as far back as the end of the 304 property, and then to its current position, and we've tried different locations for it. The least complaints that we've had is where it's at right now. Because at least then, if I need a local access, there are two other ways to get there where you don't have to go into the oncoming lane of traffic. You can go Center Street up Sunset, or you can come through the Kanema neighborhood.
Or you can go all the way to the top.
Yeah, or you can go to the top and come back. I'm hesitant to move it beyond where it's at right now because it's the location that seems to be working the best for us. The other big issue we've been having is residents moving the signs and moving the candlesticks because they feel that, I need to get here, I need to get there. At its current location, because it's so closely, tied to the intersection, we haven't had anybody going out there and moving it.
Isn't Sunset closed as well?
Sunset's closed to local traffic only, but those are type 2 barricades there that are closing that. So it's a little bit easier for somebody to make it around that.
And you mentioned your other detour signs, and the detour signs for northbound traffic. You have a sign before you get to Warner Parrott, detour south end to the right down Warner Parrott. That, I think that applies to vehicles that weigh more than 13 tons, but it's kind of confusing that somebody that's not used to what the condition is might think that applies to all south end traffic, northbound.
When the northbound, some of those signs are in place right now as an advisory. When the northbound lane gets closed in 3 weeks, the signage will actually increase. The posts are already in for the additional signs that will be going in, and there will be additional signs that will go in when we close the road, and that won't be. It'll be much more aggressive in terms of acknowledgement that nobody's supposed to be going past Warner Parrott unless you're one of the local residential roads that's down there.
So more people will be traveling on Barker Road than when they get up there and the road is closed down.
Appreciate the input.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think the planning's been good to the degree we can. It's obviously a big inconvenience, so people don't want to follow that. But I like the idea of pre-posting because we're not really sure when. We know when the county can move on that, they're going to want to move on it. And if we had to go through all the effort of calling for locates, ordering the custom signs, Martin's just taken all that in advance and got it all in place so that when the time comes, it's just a few more signs and we're good to go. The Willamette Falls Legacy Project public event, just a reminder that there is going to be a public event June 3rd. It's at OMSI. I think it starts at 1 and goes to 4 or 4:30. And some of you may have attended the one at Clackamas Community College. That was the latest version, but there was also one downtown at Keene a couple of years ago. And I think this one's going to be more on that lines. It should be a fun event. And at that event, the plan is to unveil what they've come up with for the best option for the phase 1 of the Riverwalk. So if you're interested in that, want to attend, I'm sure there'll be cake and wine and maybe even some microbrews down there.
That's on Saturday or something?
Yes.
And
Where's that going to be, John?
OMSI. And I heard that there's parking, free parking.
What time does it go from when to when?
1 to 4.
1 to 5.
1 to 5.
Yeah, 1 to 5 p.m.
There's some free parking. That area is, OMSI will be open, and it's kind of.
It's my understanding that they made some kind of arrangement. How much, I don't know. How much parking there is. But
Obviously, has
Plus
quite a
you
bit
can
of
believe
parking.
the orange line has a stop right there
Yeah.
near it. You could take that up if you like.
that's true. Yeah.
That's pretty
Use
convenient.
that alternate mode of
Yes.
transportation.
And it's only like 20 minutes or something from the transit center to, or the last park and ride.
It's a nice
to-
ride, though. I read it. Yeah.
Yep. Cross street banners. You want to talk about that?
So last winter, let's see, is it winter now? Yeah. PGE made us aware that the poles that we use for the cross street banner that's located along Malala, out there by Beverly, those poles will no longer be able to be used for deploying cross street banners. So several of our local businesses and civic events, community events use that for advertising. PGE basically went through the entire corridor and they came up with a classification system for all of their poles and came up with a grading system that says that in order for the wind loads for cross street banners, they had to be a grade, what was it, grade 4 or 5? Yeah, so it had to be a grade 4 or greater on this 5-point scale. And both of the poles that we use are poles rated at 3. So we worked with them throughout the winter season trying to find alternative locations. And while there are several grade 4s or grade 5 poles located along the corridor, there is no corresponding grade 4 or 5 pole on the other side. So trying to get an alternate location to move the cross street banner to has been difficult. So effective a month ago, Lisa stopped taking applications for the cross street banner at that location. The pole banners are still permitted in the areas that we have them at, and the cross street banner on 99 on the pedestrian walk bridge is still permitted. We're making you guys aware because we have gotten several local residents who've been upset that that's no longer available. But we're hoping that possibly with the Molalla Corridor project that something that the city owns that we construct can be incorporated into that to give us another location where we can do some local community advertising.
What was the cost on that, typically on a banner?
To hang a banner? Or
Yeah, the city fee.
there was the sign permit fee, which is like $175.
$4.
$74. And then there's the hanging fee, which is, there's an up and a down fee. And I don't remember what that is off the top of my
There's
head.
3 different types of banners.
Yeah.
And so it's $20 per street pole banner. It was $250 for the cross street banner, and then $65 for the cross street banner on 99E.
It's
So
not
one's
that
considered-
expensive for community too.
No. So the farmers market was the biggest client that we had for that, and they were fairly upset when we were told we just, it wasn't anything we chose. It was PGE's poll. And they can make whatever rules they want in terms of what can hang on it. So. Anything else?
I had one thing that maybe we should or get some feedback on, and that's the crosswalks and ADA. I know I was at the last design review board meeting for Clackamas County, and I learned something new that the way they're interpreting the ADA regulations now, it requires some extensive modification. When you touch like one ramp, you have to do all these other improvements around there. Is that something you guys have dealt with?
We, well, obviously, if you touch one ramp, you got to touch them all, assuming that they all, most of our ramps, you touch one and it affects both directions, right? So then we're dealing with all 4 of those ramps. I'm not sure the ODOT, the ODOT lawsuit has raised some higher awareness of just ADA issues in general when it comes to sidewalk ramps. So ODOT, we've sent at least 2 of our staff. I'm not sure if Matt's gone or Jason, but the specific cross slope and all the details associated with the ADA ramps, we're putting a lot of attention to those. And like this year's PMUF project, we found I didn't sit through that meeting, but I think there was some question about should the design change slightly to make sure we fully meet the latest intent of ADA rules. So I don't know if that's the same issue. Or
Yeah.
if there's something more associated with the cross slope, or is it just at the
Well,
ramp itself?
This was on one of the projects developer is doing, and they're being asked by Clackamas County on Sunnyside Road that was not too long ago constructed to go and improve those the ramps. So and they had to they have to improve 4 out of 8, and it's not just in their case. It's like if I'm making improvement here, then I have to do one on the opposite side.
Yeah.
And it's kind of adding significant cost, and it's kind of, I guess, the Clackamas County went to this training, and they got now better understanding of how they're supposed to interpret the ADA, and so it's causing a lot of headache also to Clackamas County having to go and make improvements.
So the latest guidance that we've had from our design engineers and from Matt and a couple other guys going to the training is anything greater than, so it used to be if you did a mill, you're fixing all of the ADA ramps that touch that respective area that you've milled. Now it's gotten to the point where they're starting to indicate if you do anything greater than a micro seal, that you're going to be making ADA ramp improvements. So for the last 3 PMUF seasons, we specifically allocate an amount within the budget that's for ADA ramp improvements. And John, in the last 2-year budget, actually, we put in a supplemental amount of money that was there if the ADA costs got higher. I think last year we spent $75,000 on just ADA improvements associated with the other respective transportation improvements that we were finishing with that summer season.
It's kind of significant. That's why I was wondering what are you guys doing about it.
I think the number for this summer is we're close to 50 ramps that we've got to improve, and there's 2 that we have to construct because there's no ADA ramp there at all yet. So.
And those, I haven't looked at the pricing this year, but it seemed to me like for every ramp we were spending like $5,000 a piece.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. I think
So
the number
not
this year-
insignificant PMUF dollars we're using right now. Wasn't the intent, but if it's a requirement, we got to do it. So there's an item on here, discuss summer agenda items and meeting needs. It sounds like we had a little bit of that discussion. Seems like we need to be ready to bring back a June conversation about both, maybe about both road funding and the what are we calling it? I lost my paper. The neighborhood traffic management plan, or more of a outline and draft for the June meeting. Typically, what meetings do we typically skip, Lisa?
July, August, and December. So in the summer, July and August. And I can tell you in August it would be difficult to hold a meeting because they will be doing some renovation in here between August 10th and September 1st.
I should have some draft paragraphs available for the neighborhood plan that I can forward to you prior to that meeting.
The June meeting? The June meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we could get them in our packet prior to the meeting.
So the plan right now would be to not plan to meet in August, July or August, unless I hear differently. We may want to do some more subcommittee meetings on those. And we haven't talked about who would be on that subcommittee. Obviously, Henry.
Is that June meeting on the 13th or the 20th?
It's the 20th because I'm coming back from Alaska on the 19th, so that's how I know.
Yeah, the 20th.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the last one item that I can give you more information on this, but the region, the metro region is working on regional transportation plan update, which is different than our TSP. It's more of a regional plan for where transportation funding would go in the future, and they're doing a much more detailed estimate of what the projected revenues are in the region to help cover some of those project costs. So a lot of discussions going about that. Dana Webb is attending most of those meetings, although tomorrow there is this Clackamas County Coordinating Committee meeting, which tends to deal with most of the regional transportation stuff for Clackamas County. That meeting is tomorrow. I'll be attending that with Dana, but just wanted to let you know that tomorrow night for the City Commission during the City Manager's report, I'll be giving a little update, a 5-minute update on how that's going. We know a little bit about it, but we're expecting to know more after tomorrow morning's C4 meeting. And then we'll probably follow that with a more detailed update to the City Commission in June. And with that, the last item I think we've already talked about.
Yes, we have. So what's the status of getting the presentation from the Finance Department?
Let's see, on the budget,
Yeah.
I think we just need to ask. Those guys are pretty helpful with that. So sounds like we want to do that in June too.
Yeah. Okay, does anybody else have any future agenda items they'd like to discuss?
I have one item.
Go for it.
Last spring this is in spring of 2016, I brought forward an agenda item about revising the jaywalking ordinance for Oregon City. And on March 16th, the committee recommended approval of a revision so that the jaywalking ordinance would more be similar to the one that Portland has. In other words, you're only required to cross an intersection within 150 feet of the intersection. But when I looked at the city code today, the old ordinance is still in there. I wondered what happened to that.
So that was a code change, or was it an ordinance change? I've kind of
Aren't
lost track.
ordinances in the city code?
Ordinances can change the city code. We haven't had as far as I know, we haven't had a code change yet. We're talking about doing it.
Yeah. And
so
I did follow up with Laura Turway on that, and she said that she wanted to wait to do the revision until they could lump it together with other revisions all at the same time. And like you said, they haven't had any.
When were the last revisions made? The city code had revisions as of March 3rd or something of this year.
I think it was specific to maybe the sign code, or they've been working through a couple of specific sections.
Yeah.
But I'm just glad to hear. I thought I forgot about that, so you didn't. That's great. Thanks, Lisa. And Laura's got it on her.
Yeah, I can follow up with her again, but yeah, they didn't want to do them piecemeal. They want to wait to lump them together, so that's why they didn't want to do it quite yet. So I can follow up with her again and see.
Anything else from anybody?
Does that work, Gary?
Yeah, I'd sort of like to see what you came up with for the proposed revision, though.
I have two things, one of which is a question of when is the transportation master plan due for an update?
Transportation master plan or system plan?
We
Yeah.
did in 2012, and we typically have been doing that every 10 years.
Okay. And the other one is, can we have the signal techs check out the PED signals on 7th Street? They seem to be not working correctly, if they work at all. The call buttons.
7th and what?
Washington, right? Is it 7th
Well,
and
one at Washington especially, but the one at Monroe by the Mountain Tech, when you try to cross Monroe and there's no vehicles on Monroe and 7th Street is green, it has to go through the full cycle of before you can get the walk signal. You got to get a green on Monroe, and then when it goes back to green on 7th Street, then you get the walk signal to cross Monroe.
I did see the signal. Clackamas County does our signal maintenance.
You're right.
And I saw them at Washington and 7th yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We asked them to repair that one.
Okay.
But I can let them know about Monroe.
And then Jonathan David's not here, but he sent me an email. We had a conversation about Redland and 213, and a question about folks on Redland having to sit through several phases of that when there's really not a lot of cross traffic. And he called me one day and reported kind of with a, you know, while he's sitting in the car kind of update. So I don't know if you've had a chance. I just mentioned it to
Already sent
Martin
it.
a couple days ago. So he's already sent it, and we've asked ODOT to look at that, see if it's a signal timing issue. So your feedback does matter.
Anybody else? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.
And not a moment too soon.
Yeah.